voting late tonight to extend the nation's debt limit through early December, averting economic disaster for now, after breaking a Republican filibuster meant to scuttle the deal reached between Democratic and GOP leaders. Also tonight, a lawyer for the former president telling 4 Trump loyalists to ignore subpoenas from the January 6th Select Committee. That's according to the Washington Post. The deadline to comply with the subpoenas tonight. And more breaking news in the search for Brian Laundre. Police in Florida now saying that he was under surveillance before he vanished more than 3 weeks ago. I want to bring in now CNN senior political analyst Ron Brownstein and CNN senior legal analyst Ellie Honig, a former federal prosecutor. Good to see both of you. Thanks for joining. So, Ron, the Senate voted to extend the debt limit until early December, avoiding an economic disaster. For now, it was dicey there for a bit. I mean, that's a pretty good example of just how dysfunctional our politics are right now. And, I mean, don't you think? I mean, now what? They're just sort of kicking the can down the road?
And with no prospect that there will be a better resolution on the horizon in December. Look, the important point to start that everyone has to understand is what a radical escalation in political conflict and what a reckless escalation of political conflict it is for Republicans to have filibustered the increase in the debt ceiling. Yes, it is true that Democrats have voted in the past against raising the debt ceiling when Republicans held unified control of government, but they did not filibuster. They said it was the majority party's obligation to raise it. And they let them do it after casting basically their symbolic vote of opposition. Today, McConnell struggled to find even 10 Republicans who are willing to kind of step aside and let Democrats do this on their own when the behind door number 2 is potential catastrophe in the global economy. And this is just a reminder, to Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema, who are arguing that the filibuster promotes compromise. If it is this difficult to get 10 Republicans to just step out of the way and let Democrats do this on their own, what are the odds of getting 10 Republicans to vote to do almost anything else that President Biden and the Democratic majority wants to do?
Kelly, I want to bring you in, and I want to talk about this Washington Post report that a Trump lawyer told his former advisors, Mark Meadows, Kash Patel, Dan Scavino, Stephen Bannon, not to comply with subpoenas from the January 6th committee. What sort of legal action can the committee take, if any? Is this obstruction of Congress?
Yeah, Don, this is going to come down to a matter of political will. How much political will does Congress and the committee have? And will DOJ show some backbone here? Look, it's 11 o'clock. These documents are due in an hour at midnight. I don't think Mark Meadows is going to be walking his documents into the Capitol. So what does the committee do? Now, if it feels like we've been here before, we have, because Donald Trump told us 2 years ago he was going to, quote, fight all the subpoenas. And as a result, he's managed to push off all sorts of congressional oversight. Well, here we are again. Is Congress going to learn lessons? Are they going to get into court, and I mean tomorrow, to try to compel this from a judge? Are they going to send it over to DOJ? And if and when they send it to DOJ, what's Merrick Garland going to do? It's going to be his decision. It is a federal crime to commit contempt of Congress. It hasn't been charged in many, many years, but we're also in unprecedented times right now.
Well, Ellie, then there's the Senate Judiciary Report where we learned that Trump directly asked Justice Department officials 9 times to undermine the election results. I mean, the guy was relentless. Does any of this add up to a crime? And what's to stop something like this from ever happening again?
Well, I'm on record, and I'll say it again. I do think there were crimes here. I think the president, look, trying to steal an election, broadly speaking, is a federal crime. Election interference is a crime. Fraud is a crime. Conspiracy is a crime. I don't just mean the former president. I mean Jeffrey Clark. I mean other enablers. And Don, you opened the show tonight talking about next time. What happens next time? Well, I'll tell you something. If there's no real consequences, there will be a next time. And the consequences thus far for trying to overthrow an election and overthrow democracy have been a bunch of papers, some findings, a report today, very important in normal times. But that kind of consequence doesn't resonate whatsoever with Donald Trump and his most loyal followers.
Ron, Republicans issuing a rebuttal report dismissing the idea that Trump was attempting a coup, saying ultimately the DOJ never took action. So they're saying, oh, yeah, well, he tried, but he didn't actually succeed. It really speaks volumes that there even is a GOP rebuttal report, and that their point of the coup is that, well, it's no big deal because it failed.
in some ways, this was as significant as the revelations in the majority report, because it shows how deeply the Republican Party is normalizing and not only normalizing, but kind of intensifying and trying to advance Trump's assault on democracy in the aftermath of the election. I mean, the fact that Republicans are basically saying there was nothing wrong here is of a piece with Republicans in red states using the big lie as a justification for, this raft of voter suppression bills and legislation that would increase political control over the counting of the results and make it easier to envision subversion of the results in 2024. I mean, all of this is happening together, and you talk about Merrick Garland, you talk about the Justice Department. It feels that every institution in society is having trouble grappling with the magnitude of the threat to American democracy that is developing from so many fronts, all springing from the same source of Trump's willingness to undermine democracy, if that's what it takes to maintain him in power. By the way, Don, today, Joe Manchin, who ultimately is the one who will have to decide whether to circumvent the filibuster to fight back against this with federal voting legislation, said to Manu Raju, the filibuster is the only thread we have in America to keep democracy alive and well at a time when all of this is going on. That is like right from the upside down, and it's a measure of, again, institutions and individuals are really having trouble responding to the magnitude of the threat that's developing.
So listen, if they won't comply, if there's a filibuster, there's a political part of it, Ellie, then does this have to be settled in court? In a court of law?
Yeah, look, I don't think there's any way this gets settled outside of court, because our system, as Ron was saying, relies to some extent on good faith actors, right? It's very rare historically that these kind of disputes have had to go to court, but unless Donald Trump or Dan Scavino or Mark Meadows, and they're taking their orders from Trump, suddenly comes to the table and says, guys, let's get rational here, let's work something out. Yeah, Congress is going to have to go to the courts, they're going to have to get a civil order from a judge, and they're going to have to bank on DOJ doing its part on the criminal side, yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it. I want to bring in now Fiona Hill, the former Senior Director for European and Russian Affairs at the National Security Council. She is the author of There Is Nothing for You Here, Finding Opportunity in the 21st Century. Fiona, thank you so much. It's good to see you again. I appreciate it, and good luck on the book, and congratulations on the book. Let's talk about this, because you warn in this book about the dangers to democracy. And so I just want your reaction to this Senate Judiciary report on Trump's pressure campaign to overturn the 2020 election. If it weren't just for a handful of people that stood their ground, where would this country be right now?
Well, look, we're already in big trouble. This is a full-blown constitutional crisis. And, I think that what's happening here is people just can't quite believe it. Even the people who are not, basically coming forward to answer these subpoenas are telling themselves, look, there's nothing wrong. This is all just, politics. This is all just a game. For them, it's not going to have these dire consequences. But it is. And, already from the outside, people who are looking in at the United States are recognizing all the hallmarks of a country in deep trouble. And, the idea that a coup wasn't a coup or wasn't a coup attempt because it didn't succeed, that's preposterous. It was an attempt at a coup, and we're still in the middle of it all, because there are still attempts here to subvert the course of the inquiry, to basically, as we're pointing out here, you're pointing out, to completely remove congressional oversight, to not follow through with the letter of the law. And in fact, the perpetration, as we've already been discussing, you've been discussing again, of this great big lie, fat lie, that Trump had won the 2020 election.
Yeah.
So we're still in the midst of the crisis that we've seen unfolding for now best part of 2 years.
You call Trump a would-be autocrat. Now we're also learning Trump's lawyer telling his former aides not to even cooperate with the January 6th committee. What happens if this investigation is thwarted, Fiona?
Well, it's quite a lot of evidence to the fact that our institutions are falling apart here, because they're only as good as the people who are in them and the people who want to live by the letter of the law. In other countries where we see these things happening, the rule of law has never really taken shape. It's never really taken hold. But this is a country, this is a republic that was set up on the basis of the rule of law, with a constitution, with clear legislative parameters for the business of politics. And what we're seeing is people not just chipping away, but taking huge chunks of it away now. If congressional oversight no longer functions, then what's the purpose of Congress in this, larger context?
Well, this is what you write. You said that how the government's ineffectual response to the insurrection has made it more likely the next populist will succeed where Trump failed. Explain.
Well, look, we've seen this time and time again, historically, and also in contemporary politics elsewhere in the world. Russia, for example, that I spent some time making a comparison with in the book. Boris Yeltsin, who preceded Vladimir Putin, he got into a spat with his parliament over a new constitution that gave him even more powers than he had before. He resolved it by firing on parliament, ordering the army out to shell parliament, including his own vice president and the speaker of the parliament in it. That way he rammed through this constitution. The thing was, he didn't take then advantage of it, full advantage of it. The person who did, who came along later, who had a very different sensibility about ruling the country, Vladimir Putin, he took full use of that constitution. And everyone, talks about how incompetent Trump was, but he's pushing through all of these practices, all of these procedures now. He's upending all of the legislative fail-safes that we have. So the next person who comes along may be much more competent and much more capable of putting all of that into action. And there we are. We have an autocrat.
Let's talk about something else you talk about. What's secure? Because you say President Biden's infrastructure plan is only a start, Fiona.
That's right. Look, we have to do things at the top. We also have to do things at the bottom and in the middle as well. I'm just, hoping that a lot more Americans, ordinary people, are waking up to what's happening here and realizing that, if they don't stand up, speak the truth, call out for action, that it's going to be too late. At the top, what we're missing is not the public policy approaches. We know what we need to do. The infrastructure bill and the reconciliation bill are filled with all the elements that are really needed to close the opportunity gap in the United States, to kind of fix the way that both our politics and our economy are working. But it's the political will that's missing, collective action. So people have to agitate for it from elsewhere in the system. State and local government, mayors, people who are community organisers. This is the time for people to stand up and say, look, we need to do something here. And we can't just wait for members of Congress to get their act together. That's where the problem is. Right. We've had all these revelations from Facebook recently about the algorithms being messed up. Well, our political algorithm is messed up. We're just basically in this highly polarised, highly partisan situation, and we've got to find a way of bursting through it.
We're really in a post-truth era. We have to figure out how to get back to the truth. Fiona, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
That's right.
The book again is...
Thanks so much, John.
There is nothing for you here, finding opportunity in the 21st century. You're quite welcome, Fiona. Thanks again. We've got news on the Gabby Petito case. Police telling CNN they were surveilling her fiance, Brian Laundrie, before he disappeared. And we've got a lot more on that to come. And on why Brian Laundrie's father was out with police in that Florida reserve today.